So as you all know by now, Grimmsnarl is currently being suspect tested in Scarlet and Violet. NU, this was one of the Pokemon we got when the Pokemon Home tier shifts hit every tier. And yeah, it's safe to say that it has been much more effective in this generation compared to last generation. Now there are a few reasons we can get into off the bat, but before I get into that, I do want to remind everyone that if you enjoy daily competitive Pokemon content, is you should subscribe if you are not already subscribed. We have our end of the year goal of 10k subs. If everyone that watches this subscribes, I will be some number closer to that. So that's, that's pretty dope. I appreciate the support. Anyhow, why is Grimmsnarl so much better this generation than it was last? There are two main things that come to mind immediately. Three, actually. One, terastallization. Grimmsnarl is an incredible user of it. You talk about a mon that's got not necessarily the most weaknesses off the rip, and Terra covers the very few that it does quite effectively. Let's think about it. Poison and Steel are going to be the main two things you're worried about in current NU, and in Fairy throw it in there because a lot of Pokemon will Terra into a Fairy type. Well, what if my Grimmsnarl decided, I want to be a Steel type now? Well, kind sir, or ma'am, or other pronoun. That kind of just denies all of those typings from making any ground versus you. And if we think about Pokemon that, I'll talk in terms of bulk up Grimmsnarl real quick, that would maybe try and stop a bulk up Grimmsnarl, this interaction is quite difficult for a lot of them to deal with. Sandaconda, for example. Okay, Sandaconda's not beating you if it never can force Grimmsnarl to Terra earlier in the match. Quillfish. Quillfish is not beating you very consistently, I'll say, without Grimmsnarl having already burned Terra earlier, because if it can't Barb Barrage you, well, you're not really worried about it at all. And if you're looking at a Terra Fairy Pokemon, like, say, Mesprit, well, kinda screwed there, because Grimmsnarl can Terra on you, and then, okay, well, whatever Fairy move you have, whether it's, like, Terra Fairy on a Specs Dazzling Gleam, whether you're a bulky Mesprit with Draining Kiss or something like that, yeah, you have been denied happiness. GG, noob. So that's the big reason. Off rip, just incredible user of the generation's mechanic. Second reason, the power level's just lower. I mean, if we look at Grimmsnarl's stats real quick, these aren't insane. Base stat total of 510 though, if we look through NU's Pokemon, yeah, it puts it on the upper end. We don't have a ton of Pokemon in the tier that are moving past the low 500s for base stat total. A lot of mons generally hovering at around that spot, maybe a little below it. And as a result, Grimmsnarl just often has very good stat checking capabilities. You look at this. Here's just bulk up Grim. HP, beautiful. Uninvested attack, that is still really good. So bulk up, of course, great synergy. And in your special bulk, it's not super special, but, compared to tier, it's not too bad. That's another. And then 3, something I have harped on a lot. Y'all know it. Fairy types, where are they? Last generation, we had 2 incredible fairy types in Sylveon and, God help me, I can't remember the other one, but you know it. You know its name. I don't have to remind you. Let's check real quick. What was our other fairy type? It might actually only be Sylveon, and I might have gaslit myself. Okay, yeah. It's Sylveon, and then we have the bulky poison types like Vileplume and Weezing, and even Salazzle can kind of bother Grim. Thank you, me. You're welcome, me. And you compare it to NU this gen, well, obviously fairy types, we don't really have any bulky ones at all, and we really haven't the entire generation. Carbink exists in the tier now, which is definitely something that can help against Grim, but it's not, it's not seeing a lot of use, and it's not a pure fairy type in the way that Sylveon was, different reasons you'd put it on a team. And poison types, well, we've got Quillfish, not Hisui, we're talking Johtoe and Quillfish. That's a pretty good mon. We got Muck, that's a pretty good mon, but it doesn't run physical bulk. And it gets Terran on and literally has nothing it can do. It gets Draining Punch to be super effective then, but at what cost? And if you want to spam Haze, great. Grim's probably still going to beat you down long term. And Muck also just hasn't seen that kind of use lately, so, you take away a pretty consistent poison type from a previous meta, now it's not being seen, so, you're probably not going to want to use it. You'll probably instead run into Quillfish, which, hey, we talked about why Quill isn't too good. So I would say those are the 3 big reasons why Grimm is so much better this generation compared to last gen. Specific emphasis on power level, I would say. Now I want to talk about the Pokemon sets that this little guy can run. So I kind of tried ordering them in terms of how I feel I've seen them get used, and also in terms of how I feel I've seen people complain about them. These 2 right here are going to be the big ones. This is just your standard Grimmsnarl. It's what Aim and I ran in the video we did with Mr. Grimmsnarl. And it's just very, very effective at taking over games very quickly. I think something we should do immediately, let's compare Grimmsnarl to other bulky setup sweepers. What are the ones we think about at Annu immediately? There's going to be 2 that come to mind, kind of 3, but 2 that kind of defined the bulky setup sweeper meta in different periods of Annu. Electros, Coil Electros, and then Dunsparce, whether it was Calm Mind very early on, or Coil nowadays. And the third, Sandaconda, we can throw him in as well. What does Grimmsnarl have over them? Well, there's 2 things. And this is something that I actually mentioned to ZS, because, he made an anti-ban post. I obviously disagree. I'm very pro-ban for Grimmsnarl. One of the big things immediately is Grimmsnarl is a fairy type. This means Dragon Tail is literally ineffective. Grimmsnarl doesn't have to Terra to become a fairy type, you just are always immune to Dragon Tail, and as we've seen, one of the more common ways to deal with some of these Coil mons has been just phase them with Dragon Tail. We don't have a ton of Dragon Tail mons in the tier, but we got like Appleton, and then, oddly enough, the mons that are Coil Sweepers themselves, 2 of them do learn Dragon Tail, so we've seen those. You'll have those mirror exchanges where you just try and Dragon Tail the other one out if they're not Terra Fairy, and then you get to have your way with the rest of your team. Grimmsnarl never having to care about Terraing into a Fairy type, and instead being able to use its Terra type for a different purpose, i.e. Steal here, is very, very nice. And also, as we mentioned, Bulk Up being able to cover your defense here, that just makes it harder for any Dragon Tail to break your subs or actually threaten you at all once you do Bulk Up a ton. You're still resistant to it anyway. Then you get these going, yeah, you're very, very safe. This is where we also come into the play, though. Why Grimm is so good, Prankster. As we've seen, people are very willing. I'll give you a little, line that we see people take. Maybe the bulky setup super comes in, and someone will go hard Rotom as they coil up. Well, Rotom immediately can trick you and make your life hell. There's not a ton that you got going for yourself if you take a Scarf of one of those mons. Grimmsnarl does not care about that. Grimmsnarl has sub. Prankster sub. I can always sub up safely no matter what. You could double your Rotom in immediately versus my Grimmsnarl. Someone could play their Rotom like that versus a Dunsparce or an Electros. If they aggressively double their Rotom and never let the bulky setup sweeper get in safely, they're actually at a pretty good spot. You could always threaten with a Trick, or a Will-O-Wisp even. Grimmsnarl's not like that. He's built a little different. He built a little better, a little bulkier, a little more powerful. I can sub up no matter what. I can bulk up. If I'm just bringing Grimmsnarl in off a pivot from, say, Scyther or my own Scarf Rotom, I can always bulk up on the first turn if I want, or throw off an attack and just see what my opponent wants to do. And I know for a fact, the next turn, if I need to scout with Substitute, I can do that. You have so much extra leverage around these game lines with Grimm compared to the other bulky setup supers entirely because you have Prankster. Fast Substitute is genuinely huge, especially if it ends up in you blocking a Trick from a Rotom. They gotta switch then immediately after because they're locked in the Trick, and then you can potentially get 2 bulk ups. It's dirty. It really lets you spiral games into your favor very, very quickly. And now we'll talk about Big Banded Grimm with Terra Dark. So this set is just really strong because if you think about what resists Dark, well, Play Rough covers all of them really well. So what's maybe something that would switch in on a Crunch? Bombardier is getting Play Roughed. Cacturn is not switching into Crunch well at all. An opposing Grimm, yeah, there's still Play Rough. Cloth technically counts because look how bulky this mon is, and you have Regenerator. Yeah, Cloth is a fair shout. I would then counter by saying, who the hell is using Cloth? And also, what happens if I Terra Dark? What happens when I Terra Dark, friend? That Cloth ain't taking that too well anymore. You know, Lurantis isn't really holding up any better. It's frailer than Cloth. No Regenerator, so you're really pressured. Mabostiff, Lamau. Quillfish with Intimidate is, like, kind of fair. You just still take so much damage. It's not much more than a single time switch in that you may be using as a means to get Helmet Chip. Maybe you've EV'd to be faster than Grim, and you can get off a fast Toxic, or just a Barb Barrage. Something like that could work, but it's kind of shaky. And in Hisui and Quill, well, they run specially defensive EV spreads, usually. So, not nearly as good in terms of actually checking Grimmsnarl. Sandaconda, don't look at the Terra Dark Crunch calcs. They are not safe for work. And you get the point of this junction. Grim is just so strong, especially if you Terra Dark. Your Crunch to it KOs just about anything that would actually want to switch in that isn't weak to Play Rough. And you got strong priority Sucker Punch, which is always really cool. And it pranks to Trick. I think you could still run Frisk on this kind of thing, just for extra scouting. But the fast Trick can be useful if you need to just shut something down, and you're worried about them outplaying Sucker Punch. So maybe you're facing an Oricorio. Just drop a little Choice Band on them. Pretty good way of... No, I almost tried saying navigating and maneuvering at the same time. Pretty good way of maneuvering around that. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about Resto Chesto. It is this set here, but with a Rest and a Chesto Berry. You could go offensive even with this if you want, and just have the fast Rest to get back to full. So, offensive EV spread, of course, would look something more like this, with an Adamant Nature. This set's really good as well. It gives you a lot of similar things Substitute does, just without the extra scouting. But you're still able to shake off status. You're still able to get rid of chip damage in a way. And instead of trying to win a slower game, you kind of just like, alright, I'm going to bulk up until I can't bulk no more. I will rest it off, I'll be back at full, and I'm going to try to win. You could probably even do Sucker Punch over Crunch if you wanted that here. But it's just another very powerful set. If you ran Sucker Punch, I'd also maybe recommend Terra Dark, but I do like Terra Steel a lot on some of these Grim sets that just aren't as adept at dealing with potentially Mesprit as a response, because again, Terra Fairy is a real thing to worry about. Now we're going to talk more about quote-unquote healthier Grim sets, ones that you don't see as much but maybe aren't getting as much flack. I'm going to skip ahead to offensive bulk up real quick, just so I can stop talking about this variant of Grim. Here is just 3 attacks bulk up Grim. It doesn't really see a ton of use, because the bulkier variants are so much harder to take down, and generally are better at deconstructing teams. But I will still say, adding power to the Sucker Punch is certainly something you should not disregard. And, hey, just like Choice Band, hey, who stopped me from bulking up on a Sandaconda and then 2-shotting it with Crunch? So, there's still a lot of incentive to this kind of set. You just don't see it as much because it, you know, not having the bulk, not having Substitute, it does take away from, I would say, the long-term sweeping power. It's more of a wall breaker. You treat it like that. Now, we'll talk about this set. This is a really fun Grimmsnarl set. It's actually the one that I wish we could keep it for, because I think this adds a lot to the tier. It's a fast pivot because of Prankster with Parting Shot. You have Sucker Punch, so it, you know, again, it's a revenge killer plus fast pivot that isn't actually fast, because the 219 speed ain't scaring anyone. But you get that from Prankster, and of course strong priority, which I find really fun to have. And this is the kind of set that I would love to keep it around for, because it's, you know, it's a dark plus a fairy type. That's a lot of defensive utility put in one mon. Even though the defensive stats aren't particularly inspiring, it's still a really cool set. And, you know, you're able to momentum up on some of the most common mons in the metagame, such as Sandaconda, Quillfish. What's another one that you could momentum up on? I guess Terra Fairy Mesprit is actually worth mentioning here. Just a very fun set. And in Dual Screens Grim, I will give a brief mention to this. It is a set that exists. Eject button, of course, because you want to be able to set up a screen maybe versus whatever foe you're facing, and bring in a setup sweeper once that foe attacks you. With light clay being banned, you can't run that, so eject button I believe is probably the best option. I'll note I don't have parting shot here. I don't like the idea of running a Grimmsnarl that lacks an attack. I think Spirit Break is just nice to have. In my experience using this set, I do think you could drop it for parting shot. You just got to be really careful because we have a lot of dark types in Inu. I think you're probably better off running this. You just could drop Taunt. But I like Taunt, man. I like being able to deny Stealth Road from Seneconda, so there's a lot of give and take. Eject button helps make up for the lack of parting shot. Pretty cool. And then the speed, 16 speed EVs let you hit 160. That way, if you run into a max speed Choice Specs Appleton, you can still get the jump on it and hit it with a Spirit Break. But yeah, that's Grimmsnarl sets. I mean, if I would talk about counterplay more, but we kind of already have, right? If we're looking at Pokemon in NU that are tasked with maybe checking a Grimmsnarl, I mean, it's a lot of Pokemon with maybe Terra Fairy, some stuff like Cloth to pivot around to more offensive sets, maybe Quillfish with Taunt or Haze to disrupt bulk up sets. I'll actually give a quick shout out too to a certain Pokemon, Articuno. Physically defensive Articuno sets, or even just Articuno that'll be faster than bulk up, which is literally any. If you run Haze on this mon, you could actually just stall out and beat bulk up Grimmsnarl 1v1. So it is a cool answer as well. I'll have a VR video out tomorrow where we'll actually talk about why Articuno is so highly ranked in the VR update. So that'll be cool to mention. But yeah, this is Grimmsnarl. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. How have you been dealing with Grimmsnarl best? Have you felt that it is too good for NU? Or do you think it's just, you know, another top-line threat that, yeah, really scary to face, but plenty of counterplay in your view? And yeah, I mean, if you think that there's plenty of counterplay, hey, let me know what you've been using to beat Grimm. But that's it from me. I hope y'all enjoyed. I will catch y'all in the next video. Peace.